We all feel that sometimes, don't we? That swirl of information overload, especially when you're trying to understand, these huge global shifts like how populations move. But if you look past the headlines, how do nations actually design their future? Especially when they're facing things like aging populations, economic goals, and this really fierce global competition for talent. What models are working out there? And what are the hidden costs, maybe, that come with success? So today, that's exactly what we're diving deep into. We're trying to cut through some of the noise around immigration systems. We want to explore how different countries are navigating these population shifts, for economic growth, but also social stability. Our mission here is to pull out the key insights and honestly some pretty surprising facts from the sources we've gathered. We even have a fascinating personal account from someone who lived in what you'd call an immigrant-built nation. This deep dive is all about exploring how different places approach this, the successes, yeah, but also the unexpected challenges, and maybe what it all means for you.
It's definitely a really key moment for so many countries, and understanding the choices they're making strategically, or sometimes the choices they avoid making.
Well, it's crucial for getting a handle on where the world is heading. We'll be connecting some dots that you might not expect.
Okay, so to kick things off, let's look at Canada. The material we looked at really paints this vivid picture, doesn't it? A country fundamentally shaped by immigration. Yeah, a nation built, historically anyway, by diverse cultures where different talents have, constantly added to its vitality. And that personal account I mentioned from someone who lived there, it really brings it to life. Describes how immigrant communities just transform neighborhoods, breathing new life, economically and culturally, into streets that were maybe pretty quiet before.
Yeah, and what's particularly striking, I think, is that Canada's current system, the one that's contributed so much to its growth and identity, it was largely set up back in the era of Pierre Trudeau.
Right, the father of the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Exactly. And that framework, it was quite forward-thinking at the time. It really laid a foundation for the nation's expansion, and it proved remarkably durable and adaptable, really, for decades.
Still, though, even with a blueprint that's successful, Canada isn't immune to challenges. That's clear now. Lately, the country's seen these really rapid increases in immigration,
hmm
and that's led to, well, rising housing costs, inflation. I even read about an increase in homelessness. It seems success can bring its own headaches.
Well, Canada's experience really shows this crucial lag effect, I'd call it. Even a successful merit-based system, if you scale it up too quickly, it can eventually outpace the national infrastructure. So an engine for growth can, years down the line, actually turn into a source of domestic strain if things like infrastructure and social services don't keep up. It just highlights how critical that effective system design is for a nation's future, but also, how important continuous adaptation really is.
Okay, so while Canada's grappling with the scale of its immigration success, Japan offers a really different model, doesn't it? Much more caution, culturally, historically defining its borders.
Right.
And it's interesting that the Japanese government makes such a clear distinction between immigrants, like people with permanent residency, and just foreign workers,
Right.
even when those workers are pretty essential to the economy.
That distinction is absolutely key. Japan primarily relies on two main ways to bring in foreign workers. There's the technical intern training program and then the specified skilled worker program, which they introduced back in 2019.
Good.
Now, the technical intern training program, its stated purpose is skill transfer, right?
Mhm.
But in practice, we found research suggesting it's often functioned more as a source of, well, cheap labor.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this has led to problems in some cases, poor working conditions, even human rights concerns for some of the interns involved.
And Japan, like a lot of developed nations, is facing that double whammy: aging population, declining birth rate. So this demographic reality means it's relying more and more on foreign workers for essential jobs like caregiving, construction.
Absolutely. They simply aren't generating enough domestic workers for those really crucial sectors anymore.
Right.
And this reliance, it does raise a pretty important question. While it's necessary, maybe bringing in foreign workers at low wages without improving labor conditions at home, well, that could potentially push down Japanese wages across the board.
Okay.
And it could worsen the overall working environment for everyone. It's not just an ethical thing, it's a really crucial challenge for the long-term sustainability and equity, I'd say, of Japanese society. Ignoring these issues could end up creating a kind of two-tiered labor market, and that doesn't really benefit anyone in the long run.
Okay, so that's Canada's broad approach and Japan's caution. But for a really deliberate strategy, one that's a stark contrast to both, We should look at Singapore.
Hmm.
The city-state. They seem to have gone all in on a highly selective immigration policy with very clear economic aims.
Oh, absolutely. The statistics on Singapore are, well, quite compelling. One report we looked at showed that as of 2024, nearly 40% of its population is foreign-born.
40%? What?
Yeah. And in just the last 20 years, its population has grown 1.5 times. But listen to this. Its GDP per capita has tripled in that same time.
Tripled.
Tripled. Right now, Singapore ranks fourth globally, GDP per capita around 90,000 US dollars. Japan, for comparison, is 36th at about $30,000, which is actually the same level Singapore was at 2 decades ago.
That's incredible.
It is, and interestingly, both countries share that challenge of really low birth rates. Singapore's is down at 0.97, Japan's is 1.15, both alarmingly low.
So Singapore's policy is aggressively focused on the economy and super selective.
Highly selective.
They actively go after high-skilled talent, offering incentives like exemptions on the foreign worker levy for companies that hire them.
Right, meaning companies pay less tax for bringing in those specific skilled people.
But then, really strict limits on lower-skilled workers through different permits: work permit, S-Pass, employment pass. It sounds like a tiered visa system based on job type, salary, education.
Exactly. Tightly controlled.
But this aggressive economic focus, it does seem to have a human cost. Our sources mentioned an anecdote, didn't they, about a Japanese man?
Yes, married to a Singaporean.
Right. And despite contributing for years, he still struggles to get permanent residency. Reportedly feels like a sort of second-tier citizen in his adopted home.
And that specific story, it really highlights the trade-offs, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
While Singapore's approach has undeniably boosted its competitiveness internationally, finance, IT, biotech, it also creates these societal challenges. You see significant wage gaps between citizens and foreign workers. Cultural clashes can pop up, potentially leading to social division because, well, deeper integration is difficult by design almost. That tripling GDP with a 40% foreign-born population, it's not just a number. It really showcases a deliberate, almost ruthless economic strategy, one that prioritizes highly specialized talent over broader social integration. That's a trade-off many nations really struggle to even think about.
Yeah.
Now, as an inherently international city, Singapore thrives on that vitality, cultural and economic, that diverse talent brings. But for a country like Japan with, historically lower cultural diversity,
Right.
trying to adopt a similar path would definitely require some very proactive strategies to try and mitigate those kinds of social issues beforehand.
Okay, let's circle back to Canada for a second. Let's talk about a different angle. The money side of things. Canada often uses that point-based system, right? Assessing people on education, work experience, age.
Makes it transparent.
Merit-based.
Yeah, it seems quite transparent, merit-based, high scores get prioritized. But I wonder, does that kind of meritocracy always capture the full picture of what an immigrant might contribute? Could it miss valuable people sometimes? That's a really valid concern, and it's something lots of countries grapple with. Alongside the points system, Canada also has an investor immigration program.
Ah, right.
And this requires a pretty substantial investment. We're talking 800,000 Canadian dollars.
Wow, okay, that's about 120 million Japanese yen, roughly.
Yeah, around that. And it's typically held for 5 years. So this shows how immigration systems can also be, well, stratified by economic power. It favors those with significant capital. It's a global thing, really, not just Canada. The wealthy often find an accelerated path.
Okay, now contrast that with Japan. They also have an investor-type visa, the business manager visa.
They do.
But here's the kicker, right? The required investment is currently just 5 million Japanese yen.
Just 5 million.
That feels tiny by international standards. That's a huge disparity.
It really is. And this very low threshold, it has actually created considerable problems. One report we read pointed to cases where people get the visa without actually running a business.
Oh.
Yeah, leading to issues like real estate speculation or causing trouble with local residents over properties being used for, say, unregistered short-term rentals that bypass local rules.
Okay.
Now, compare that sharply with, say, the U.S. EB-5 investor visa. Former President Trump had proposed raising the minimum investment there to $5 million US.
Which is what, around 750 million yen?
Roughly, yeah. So Japan's current standards for investor immigration Arguably, they're just too lenient, easing regulations, too much risks, undermining social values, community stability. So thinking about increasing that investment threshold, maybe significantly, along with stricter enforcement and perhaps some restrictions on foreign buying of real estate, that seems pretty essential to protect the integrity of the system and, the local communities.
So, okay, given everything we've talked about, Canada's scale issues, Japan's caution, Singapore's selectivity, these investment angles, what is the path forward? Especially for a country like Japan. It seems the question isn't whether to accept immigrants anymore, but really what kind of talent, under what conditions, and crucially, with what strategy.
Exactly.
It feels like a really complex, urgent, strategic choice for the nation's future,
Yeah.
one that could really shape its global standing.
Absolutely. And the demographic reality for Japan, much like Singapore, is that unstoppable trend, low birth rate, aging population. That's not going away. Now, looking ahead, things like advances in AI, they could potentially reduce language barriers,
Interesting point.
which might increase interest from foreigners wanting to come to Japan. But there's a flip side.
Uh-huh.
It could also potentially increase the outflow of Japanese talent if domestic conditions don't keep up, if they aren't competitive. Countries need to stay attractive on lots of fronts, not just economically, to hold on to and attract the skilled people they need. It's about being globally competitive for human capital.
That's such a crucial point about competitiveness. Japan offers good things, right? Public safety is generally good, cost of living relatively low.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is, can it truly win that global competition for skilled workers if domestic labor conditions, especially wages, don't improve? We found evidence suggesting Canada faced a similar issue, right? Losing talent to the U.S. because of better conditions there.
Precisely. It's a constant battle for nations to stay appealing.
Yeah.
And another factor we can't ignore, especially comparing Japan to somewhere like Singapore, is its relatively lower cultural diversity, historically speaking.
Okay.
That could amplify cultural clashes, social issues, if there's a large influx of foreign residents without really adequate preparation and support systems in place. Generally, for developed nations, the focus tends to be on attracting high-skilled or essential workers, particularly younger talent. Not so much retirees who contribute less directly to industry. Strategically investing in younger talent for industrial revitalization, well, it isn't just good policy. It feels like an imperative for economic vitality.
So it sounds like a forward-looking approach needs to think beyond just temporary labor fixes.
Definitely.
The research seems to suggest that considering permanent residency for essential workers, that should be on the table. Along with building comprehensive support systems, even though we know there can be social challenges, like we've seen in parts of Europe, it's about securing those long-term contributions and trying to foster real integration, right?
This isn't some problem for the distant future. I'd argue it's a crisis brewing right now, given Japan's ongoing economic challenges. We really need to move beyond just temporary fixes. There's an urgent need, I think, to convene experts immediately to design a robust, long-term immigration system, learning from everyone else's experiences, the successes and the challenges, positive and negative. That's our responsibility, really, to build a system that doesn't just make economic sense, but one that also upholds human dignity and strengthens community bonds. It's about proactively, thoughtfully designing a future for the entire society.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive has really shown, I think, that managing immigration is just such a complex balancing act.
It really is.
A game of trade-offs, constantly, between economic growth and social cohesion. There are definitely no easy answers.
No easy answers at all.
But there are definitely profound lessons, it seems, to be learned from looking around the world.
Indeed. And designing an immigration system, it isn't just about plugging numbers into economic models. It's fundamentally about shaping a nation's identity, its future. It's about how we choose to build society together, ensuring that, human dignity and community ties are preserved somehow amidst all the economic goals, finding that elusive sweet spot.
So for you, the listener, maybe consider this as we wrap up. If a nation's relative economic strength dictates its power to attract and keep talent, and if social stability really hinges on thoughtful integration, then what truly defines a country's attractiveness on the global stage, beyond just the bottom line, beyond the balance sheet, what cultural factors, what social factors, environmental ones maybe, will truly differentiate nations in the decades to come, what makes them genuinely desirable places to live and work and contribute, something to think about.